On today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Los Angeles musician Dani Hagan. We're going to discuss her career, beginning with her upbringing in North Dakota, how she's discovered her own style, the high profile people she's worked with, and how she stays grounded and focused while still having a blast. This show has great tips and advice for any musician looking to find their way in the big city. Okay, Dani Hagan, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to see you after all this time.
I know. It's been forever, and obviously we got to catch up a little bit before. Not so many years have passed, but not enough time to really dive into it. We'll catch up with one of your shows soon. But I wanted to kind of sort of jump right in, right? Like, so you grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and you've sort of rose to this prominence in a big city like Los Angeles. And my first question was like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced along the way coming from small town to big city as a musician?
I think the biggest thing was accomplishing my seasoning that you kind of collect along the way. Like I look back at some of the footage of back when I was fresh off the bus, like just me and my little acoustic guitar doing my singer-songwriter thing and catching a break as you go when you're like an emerging artist and you're fresh on the scene and everything. And I was actually always very fortunate with people taking a risk on me and giving me a chance and collaborating with me and passing me along to this person. You should meet that person. So I've actually been pretty fortunate that way. And I love the obstacles and the journey. I love overcoming those obstacles. It's a pleasure for me instead of like this angry thing that I have to deal with. So I like playing dress up. So when someone's like, oh, you're so good, you're so talented, if only you were wearing this outfit instead. Okay, fine, I'll play dress up. That's part of the game for me.
Right. That's hilarious. Okay, cool. So if we're gonna call your music like a blend of soulful rock, right? So how did you arrive at that sort of unique sound, and like were there certain musical influences that sort of helped shape that sound as what you have today?
Absolutely. The biggest influence in my life is the musicians that came up with. My background is very classical. It's very opera, musical theater, and I worked really hard to hide that and to not be identified that way when you come out to LA and you want to be a pop star or a rock star, and allowing the musicians that I was collaborating and performing with to let their sound come through while they were working on the songs that I had written. Kind of pick like, oh, I like that. I'm still, to this day, I love being inspired and I love being influenced, and allowing that sway to happen allows you to stay rooted in who you are. Because I think that's where, when people call me soul rock or blues rock, I think it's the storytelling aspect that comes through is the authentic part. Yeah, I think the storytelling's been that common denominator through all the sounds. But also ZZ Ward and Grace Potter and Dua Lipa, before she turned into a big pop star, I was a huge fan of hers, and I still am. But I saw her perform live, and she had done these really like raw, gritty performances of these honest, sexy, like rock songs. And I was like, I want to write a song like that. Why don't I? And it was this wonderful, liberating moment after seeing her perform. And I went and I wrote a couple of the best songs that I've ever written after that. And then I was like, ooh, that kind of helped to shift me into a more authentic songwriting process for myself and my perspective, and being playful with it and less precious about it has been really freeing as well.
So the storytelling and not taking it, having fun with it, like you said, playing dress up when needed, but more just having fun with the process and being true to yourself, and having those influences that sort of help you shape things, but not to the point where you're emulating someone. You're just sort of taking things here and there, but kind of making it your own.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I love feeling the impact of other artists and seeing how that moves me. Like I don't ever see anything as an obstacle. I see it as opportunity. Is like, okay, how do I get around this? How do I get over this? How do I evolve out of this? That's the fun part for me, is getting to where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's like a ever evolving sort of journey that you're on. You've played some pretty iconic venues here in Los Angeles, Viper Room, Malone's, and many others. But So how do you feel like when you're playing sort of these iconic venues, like how do your music, how does it resonate with audiences at these venues? I would imagine you've been doing it long enough to where you're bringing in your own following. Maybe in the beginning when I would play, same difference, you have a lot of friends and family, but over time you start to see they're not going to come to every show. They'll come in the beginning, they'll support you, but after that, it's kind of up to you to build that following and to continue to play those sort of venues. You have to have a following, right? So what would you see, like, how's that resonating in these iconic venues with your audience and building from there? How does that sort of working for you?
Well, that's the thing is I have a really incredible music community and friends and family that are so supportive, and they've evolved into fans, and then, they invite somebody and then they become a real fan. So the audience is often filled with what I look at as friends and family. And I've just recently come to realize, like, no, I think I've got some real fans out there now too. But then also the people that are there to see other artists perform, and they stick around to hear your music, and then they stick around till the end to talk to you afterwards. It's like, okay, that's the exciting part for me, is when I get to steal somebody else's audience and make them my own. And it's hard in LA. I've come to realize, the way I've wrapped my brain around Los Angeles, is everybody wants to be the star. Nobody wants to be in the audience. So, and everybody's got 25 other things that they could be doing, different events and things in their own life. It's become so fulfilling for me to get out of LA and to play where people are just showing up for the music. And that's been really rejuvenating for me as an artist. And then taking that energy, bringing it back to LA, all of a sudden everything's just multiplying in LA, because I've just my cup's kind of filled up again from touring.
So it's getting out of LA, seemingly, that will help reinvigorate you to come back here and bring that energy to these same venues. And as well as, it sounds like you're saying you're feeding off of meeting new fans,
Yeah.
right? And meeting new people who may be there to see another artist, but if you can sort of, like you said, convert them into a fan of yours, right? Now they tell their friends and then their friends, and it sort of builds from there. So for someone who's, trying to figure out this whole Los Angeles, the navigation of becoming a musician, a successful musician, sometimes it might be just getting out of town to sort of build those chops on the road and bringing them back home, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to break through in LA, and we're in such a different era right now where everybody's a bedroom rock star, and with TikTok and Instagram and social media in general, there's a lot of people that are TikTok famous, for instance, but they've never been on a stage with a live audience before. And that's where I thrive. I'm a live artist. I want to be on stage. I want to feel the instruments playing next to me. I want to feel the energy of the audience. That's where I thrive. So that's the biggest thing for me, is just getting out and performing as often as possible.
Yeah, if you can keep those, it's like reps you get, right? Every time you go out there, you're sort of building that your endurance, whatever it might be, and just perfecting what you know. And I can imagine the musical theater. I had a lot of friends that did the same thing. They were big into musical theater, and that was their biggest thing. Was like, okay, now I'm singing in front of this mic, and I don't need to project my voice so much. It became like sort of a block for them because they couldn't. It took a lot of training mentally to tone it down and be able to sort of belt out, but not trying to reach someone, 25, 30 rows back, because everyone's in a small club and you have a microphone and a PA and all that kind of good stuff.
There's a learning curve with it, right? Like, there's musical theater, sometimes you don't even have a microphone and you're just singing to the back of the audience. And you don't need to do that when you've got a mic in your face. And that was a very important lesson that I learned from my mentor, Jeff Barry. He's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame songwriter. And we were in Aspen at a music festival. And he's like, there's a moment in one of your songs, I forget what song it is, where I just go, and he's like, the microphone picks up your breath. Why wouldn't it pick up? Like, you don't have to sing so big. Like, that's what the microphone is there for. And being able to pull it in allows it to expand so much more when you learn to use your tools as your actual tools. So it's expanded me as a singer by branching off into these different genres. And the interesting thing is I've actually circled back around to some of my classical background. I've got a new single that we're in pre-production for recording right now, and it's very opera. And like I said, for the longest time, I tried to hide any of my classical training because it's not rock and roll, right? You got to have that grit. You got to have that rootedness. Nobody wants to hear opera. And now we're doing a song that's very much a nod to the style of Evanescence.
Oh.
And the crowd's going wild for it. Like, it's just crazy. It's everybody's favorite song in a live performance. And it blows my mind because it's effortless for me to get up into this operatic voice up here.
Right.
So it's been interesting to kind of circle back around and embrace the things I was rebelling against for a while.
Yeah, you're sort of like rediscovering that range that you probably were so, relying on years back, but now you've kind of come full circle and, reintroducing it, I guess I should
Yeah.
say, Well, and that sort of leads me to my next question, how you balance experimenting with different genres, but maintaining like your own signature style. How do those things sort of play into the same mold of your songs?
Well, I think as a songwriter, it comes out very natural. Like I'm not too terribly structured with it. My brain works in iambic pentameter because I was raised on Shakespeare, and that lends itself to songwriting. So I have this natural structure and rhythm pattern that comes through in my thoughts. And having a band has been really helpful to get a rooted, consistent sound, because I don't have to write every single guitar part. I can take it to my co-writer and guitarist Aaron Medina, and he'll help me work out the parts, and it just has a much more cohesive sound. And I've been working with Mikal Blue in the recording studio, and I've learned just how much a producer's thumbprint is left on every single song. And Mikal Blue is absolutely iconic. He's been a dream to work with, and helps to, kind of sculpt that sound for me along the way. And I think I'm constantly progressing, but the thread of consistency is me. Right. So like, as I can play with these different artists, these different producers, I'm just staying true to who I am and the stories that I'm telling, and also not trying to stay within a box. And there's a place and time for it. Sometimes you have to be able to reduce it down into a box where the powers that be can comprehend what you are trying to deliver as a package or something that you're trying to sell, the music and everything. But more than anything, just allowing myself to be a little bit more free flowing with it. And I think any good song, no matter how you produce the song, is what puts it into a different genre. If it's a good song, it's a good song. And that's all I really care about.
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Oh, if I can just strip it down to an acoustic or a piano and a vocal, it's a good song." Without all the production. But speaking of someone like Mikal, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he's worked with some pretty big OneRepublic, I think, Jason Mraz, right? Some pretty big names. I mean, what's that sort of like? That has to be at least some sort of a assurance that you're on the right path, right? If you're working with people in that sort of level, what does a person with that sort of experience bring to your songs that you may have not realized were there?
He's so incredible. I mean, having developed Jason Mraz and OneRepublic and Colby Calais, and then for him to take me on as an artist was just like such an honor to be welcomed into the studio that way. And it almost feels like a safety net of, okay, I'm supposed to be here. I'm welcomed into this environment, and now I can take these risks and I can explore it. And he's so good at allowing me to not have to filter myself musically, because sometimes the way I describe music, I'm not that classically trained when it comes to music theory and things like that. So I will describe things with colors, or I'll come up with interesting patterns or chord progressions that don't actually exist, and we've kind of nicknamed them Dani Chords. I think you might remember my Dani Chords.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm just putting my finger somewhere. I'm like, it sounds pretty. I don't know what it is. And it turns out it's like an E minor seventh with a
augmented this and
yeah. And that's where the blues come in. And that's just like a natural, I don't know what I'm doing, but there's a blues element that comes through because of the complexity of the chords that I'm pulling out of nowhere. But he's very encouraging of my creative process and helps to translate it to the musicians that are in the studio with me. And then the musicians that I'm working with, oh my God, it's the musicians on my album are just Greg Bissonette. He's Ringo Starr's drummer.
Wow.
And he's my
Which
drummer.
does everything. Right.
If Ringo Starr's picking a drummer to be his drummer,
right,
and he's on my album,
yeah.
I still I fan out.
Can do no wrong there. So it sounds like working with Mikal is like liberating and sort of freeing as an artist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So sort of letting you be yourself.
I talk about these things as playgrounds. Like I've elevated up into this different playground, and I feel like I made friends on this playground now. And then that opens up doors to go play on this playground over here. And that's my music community has expanded and elevated so much. And I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And that's You know, you hear so much about imposter syndrome and we all deal with it as we go, but I feel very at ease with where I'm at. And I just work with incredible people.
Yeah, it's like they push you to be your best, right? The
Yeah.
better they are, the more you want to be your best, the more it pulls out of you, the more you feed off of their energy. And a lot of these people, like I would imagine, these drummers and bass players, it's like it's probably just artistic. Just watching them lay down a track must be just insane, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
You
and
know,
then like I heard Corky, one of my guitarists, was talking with Mikal Blue in the parking lot, and I kind of came up from behind them and I overheard them talking about me, and I was like, "Oh, am I not supposed to hear this?" And I was like, "Oh, they're saying like really nice things about me." This is great. It's very validating.
Yeah.
To be in, because Corky is the guitarist who helped make Avril Lavigne with her first album, and Corky James, and he's just, you know, for him to speak on me as an artist that he's inspired to be working with and can see me going places and everything, it's like, okay, I'm doing something right. This is good.
Yeah.
People I admire are admiring me back. I'm like, it's validating.
Yes. Yeah. No. Exactly. Exactly. I can imagine. Well, and that's sort of like leads me to my next question. Like, how do you stay grounded and authentic, right? So you would figure there's a lot of pressures in the industry in general in LA and whatever music scene you're in. The bigger the city, the bigger the market, the more, well-respected players that you're with. There has to be more pressures that come with that. How do you sort of stay grounded and authentic amidst those pressures?
Well, after every high, there generally comes a low, which can be very humbling. The come down after the high, the most iconic moments, one of the most iconic moments of my life is I wrote a duet with an opera singer named Radmila Lally, and we wound up charting on Billboard Top 100. We peaked at number 21 on the dance charts, and then she was debuting her second album at Carnegie Hall. So I got to go to Carnegie Hall and perform our Billboard charting song with her. And
Wow.
I'm like, I'm on stage at Carnegie Hall. This is absolutely wild. Fast forward to the next day, I am back in LA working at a restaurant, seating people at tables. And it's so humbling. Like, you have to start over every day. You can be at Carnegie Hall one day and then be serving people the next. And Carnegie Hall was absolutely amazing and very fulfilling, but also I felt so disconnected from the audience, just with the structure of the stage and the energy of the show and everything. So I came back and I did a show at Bar Lubitsch, which is this tiny little stage.
West Hollywood, right?
West Hollywood, yeah. It's like this really narrow, tiny room in the back. And that was almost more fulfilling for me because I was so close and connected with the audience. I could make eye contact. I could interact. I was like, okay, for every Carnegie Hall, there's going to be a Bar Lubitsch. And that just helps to root and ground me. And also just keeping high caliber people in my life. And yeah, just really recognizing that Carnegie Hall was great, but the journey to get to Carnegie Hall was the fulfilling part for me. So I really do. I love the journey. I love getting to where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you can like sort of check those things off, right, as you go along in your career, but you always can come back and come back home and be rooted in front of like your people and have your audience and feed off of that, because that's usually the way at least in my experience, most artists stay sort of grounded, is getting back to basics, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
And just
And
songwriting, me and my guitar and my pink and purple pens in my lyric book, sitting on my bed until 3 a.m, sorting out thoughts. Like I feel so relieved after that. Like that's my grounding. That's the root of who I am, I guess.
Well, like speaking of Carnegie and other venues you played, you mentioned before we started this that you've been touring a lot out of Los Angeles, obviously. But do you have like any sort of like memorable or wild experiences from one of your live shows you could share?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago we were in Paso Robles and we show
Beautiful.
up and it was this house. What was the name of the venue? Smiley's, I'll have to remember the name of the venue, but we show up and it's a house that's converted into a bar and the place is empty. And I'm like, am I playing a house party right now? What is happening? And the place fills up and it feels like I'm at a frat house playing a show. Like I'm on the dance floor. There's not really a stage. And it was absolutely wild. Like people were walking in the door next to me and they would pick me up as I'm singing a song. Like some guy walks in and I start singing to him and he picks me up and starts spinning me around on the dance floor as I'm singing.
Wow.
And there was this girl, she was absolutely wild. She was drinking and, she bought me a drink and then she me a rose, and she carried my tip jar around for me and collected tips. And then in the middle of a song, she flashes me while I'm
Wow.
singing, and I'm
Okay.
like, me, this is so rock and roll. Who am I?
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the next day, we're playing another venue, which is a little bit more family friendly. It's outdoors in the daytime. It's this elevated stage. And like, I've got people on all three sides of me that I'm performing for, and their kids are sitting on the hay barrels. And we're playing the same set of music, and everybody's loving it equally. They're just loving it differently. So that spectrum in the span of 2 shows was pretty wild.
That is quite the contrast from night to night, Well, maybe she'll be, a lifelong fan at the very least, right?
I hope so. I know her intimately now.
Oh, there you go, right? Yeah, exactly. You've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah.
But like, so when you come back to LA, right, you're back in this like huge mix of musical talent, and there's this, how's like this vibrant music scene influence your growth as an artist, and sort of like more importantly, like how do you stay relevant in this large pool of talented musicians? I know we touched upon it earlier, but is there a way that, for someone listening that's just kind of getting started on their career, what do you recommend in terms of a way to sort of stand out as best as you can?
Show up. Show up, go out, whether you're performing or not, be supportive. There is plenty of room for us all to succeed. I always show up looking like a star. I walk into the room, whether I'm the one under the spotlight or not. The spotlight, I enjoy the spotlight. So, but you show up, you be supportive, and you take notes, and you see who's performing, and you're like, okay, that was really good. That didn't work or didn't land. Why not? What would I have done differently? So I'm constantly absorbing and learning. And like I said, I love to be influenced, and I love to be impacted, and I love to see what works and what doesn't, and to be a little bit calculated about it, to be intentional in when I go to a show. And there's times I go to a show just to enjoy. And there's most of the time when I go to a show, it's to learn, it's to absorb and to grow myself. And like I said, there's plenty of room for everybody to succeed. But I've also come to realize most people aren't willing to do the amount of work that I'm doing. So I don't, and I'm not a competitive person. I'd rather be a supportive person. So that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, so be a sponge and do the work, right?
Yeah.
Basically just get in there and don't make it like a competition. Like you said, there's plenty of room for everyone to make it big. It's just, it's better to have friends in the industry than be, enemies with everyone, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. I have this vision in my mind. You hear about what's that area where all the songwriters were in the 70s? Canyon. Which one?
Oh, Laurel
Canyon. You hear about those stories in Laurel Canyon,
sure,
where all these songwriters got together, and I'm like, we're living out that chapter of our history book right now. I feel like I'm surrounded by the musicians that are coming up with me. Fast forward 25 years, this is the moment that they're going to be writing about. And I like to romanticize everything. So it allows me to really kind of soak it up and enjoy it, and recognize that everybody's on their different journey. And I want to be supportive, and I want to be supported. I give twice as much as I take. And all of my friends are crazy talented, and I love celebrating that.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, if you can be surrounding yourself with, people, that are pushing you to be better. I mean, that's the best. You don't want to be someone that, has everyone that's pulling you down, or not as, supportive as you are with them. And, it gets ugly in that regard. But like, in terms of like your creative process, I know you mentioned like pen and notebook, but do you have like a specific process when you get inspired by an idea, and how you sort of approach just songwriting and crafting music, sort of like that defies categorization? Like, if you could give us a glimpse into sort of the creative process, whether you're, with your guitar player or by yourself, or how do you sort of start once an idea hits your brain?
A lot of times I'll hear music, I'll hear lyrics and the melody simultaneously. And so I always have my lyric book within an arm's reach, and I don't write in blue or black ink. If I'm writing in blue ink, it's like teal blue or sky blue. And then I have what's called synesthesia. So I have a neural cross-wiring of my senses, where like when I hear music, I see colors, and it's been amplified over the last couple of years as I've kind of identified this condition that I have. It's really a superpower. And so I realized, I write in color because I'm seeing colors when I hear the music. And So I hear music and melody often simultaneously. And as I mentioned earlier, I think in iambic pentameter. So my stream of consciousness tends to just fall out in form of a song. And there are times where you sit down and you got to be structured about it. You have to be like, okay, I'm going to write a song and this is a songwriting exercise. And I get a lot of good songs out of that technique. But in a more flow state, I'm always looking for ways to stimulate my flow state, like creating time for that. It just falls out of me naturally if I get out of the way of it. And I've learned, as much as I wish I were better on the guitar and the piano, and as much as I wish I carved out more time to enhance those skills of mine, I do a better job if I step back and just do the lyrics and the melody. And then instead of me trying to like match the melody with chords that I don't know how to play, I'm so fortunate now that I can take them to a co-writer like Aaron Medina or Art Santora or whoever I'm currently working with. And they're incredible on their instruments and they can match what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden the song gets so much better. Like my last song that I put out is called Too Much. And I've played that song for years and it's always really moved my heart. And I wrote this weird chord progression underneath this beautiful melody and lyrics and everything. And we took it into the recording studio with Eli Rise as a co-writer. And Eli Rise, the day that I went into the studio to write with Eli was the day that he went platinum for his song with Lady Gaga, not Bad Romance. Which song was it? I'll have to look it up. Sorry. But I was like, this is a good sign. This is a good sign. Eli's doing good. Yeah. And so Eli stripped out my chord bed. He's like, we just got to get rid of all of this. Lyrics and melody, great, but all this has to go. And he sat down and just on the piano. It was just wild to watch his genius come through on the keys. And the song just elevated immediately. I had been playing the song for years, but it was missing that. And what the parts that he brought into it, I think is a huge part of why the song was as successful as it was on Spotify and everything. It really blew up more than any of my other songs. So yeah, I love collaborating and I love the creative process and I love flow state. And I've come to embrace when I get stuck. Like, don't force creativity, just create space for her to arrive. And I do a lot of creative cross training as well. Mm-hmm. If I get burned out musically, which happens when I live and breathe music all day, every day, but I'm so hyper creative, I still need some sort of activity. I paint. And so if I spend a night painting, either in silence or listening to classical music, I wake up the next day and I'm 100% rejuvenated back for music and I'll write like 5 songs in the next 24 hours. So creative cross train.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you designed album covers?
Maybe. I've started to play with that a little bit. Not album covers, but like album tributes. I did a big painting for my Kissing You EP recently, which was really cool because I incorporated mixed media elements where I have drumsticks from my drummer Andrew Crosswhite from one of our shows, and the drum broke, so I stitched it onto the canvas. And then Greg Bissonette, I have his chord chart from when we recorded it in the studio, and I've got that plastered on there, and I've got guitar strings and my guitar pick with my little logo on it and everything. So it was a nice tribute painting.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So like, okay, so you're talking about albums, right? And I don't know, when you started, how it is now with streaming, right? Digital streaming. And even social media, right? These sort of platforms came out of to the industry and they've impacted it. Some would say negatively, some would say positively. How would you say digital streaming and social media have affected you on both a positive and negative aspect?
The business side of things is not my forte, and I work really hard on stepping up to the plate with those things. Social media is a necessary evil. I think streaming is incredible because it gives people access to music. It's made albums almost irrelevant. Like, nobody's buying albums unless it's Taylor Swift. And everybody's attention span has been reduced down to about the length that it takes to scroll up your screen. So it's really hard to, how do I grab people's attention and hold it? And I don't want to be reduced down to just creating short form content. I'm a songwriter. I want to perform. I want you here. I want you with me. But the reality of our life and our culture these days, it exists in a cell phone. So, you have to adapt and you have to find a way to translate a 45-minute live show into a 15-second reel. It can be it can be really disheartening to have to play that game. But I've since circled around like, okay, how can I make this fun? How can I make this, like I said, it's not an obstacle. It's something, it's just a new way to communicate. So let's explore that. Find a playfulness in it, I guess, which I don't achieve every day, but I try. But I love that music is so accessible to everybody, but I hate that I'm the last one to get paid. So it's really hard to make a living doing this. It doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's tough. I know, like, once you get into streaming and platforms that take a certain percentage of the song, and it's just like another hand in the jar, I guess, so to speak, for when you're sitting down, like you said, with your teal pen and writing down these ideas and the melody and the lyrics at the same time, right? And you take them and it kind of grows from there. But then there's other companies like, okay, 30% or whatever, it's ours, like, just for putting it on our platform. And I get it's a business, but that's sort of what I was getting at. Like, back in the day, you could just sit and print some CDs, sell them out of the back seat of your whatever car, and be able to get the music directly to the people. They had to come to the show to get the CD, all that kind of good stuff. And now it's, like you said, they'll check out your reel first. Oh, if I like this, maybe I'll click her link and listen to a couple songs or things like that. But it becomes, it's like sort of a necessary evil,
And if they have to click more than 2 buttons, they're not going to do it.
Right. So there's a whole psychology behind it too, where you have to play into that as how you're going to keep their attention, which isn't very long, just very short
algorithms span. And all those things.
Right. And how are you going to trend over someone else? So it sounds like it's here to stay. It's just not the greatest thing, but it is useful. It is, you may get to some kid in Japan or something that would never even be, exposed to your music had it just been for you, being in the States. But kind of the give and take with technology.
Well, and as we talk about technology, it is a necessary evil, but it's not the only way to succeed. And I keep getting reminded of that every time I leave LA. People are ravenous for music. They're lining up at the door to come to these shows. They don't care that I'm playing. They just care that there's music, that there's live music that's going to be there. And I just, especially coming out of the pandemic and everything, where we've all been, we were confined for years and the screen was all that we had. People want that human connection, that like you're just within feet of each other, you can't beat live music. And part of it is the synesthesia of me, but feeling those live instruments, that live frequency, you can't recreate that through a cell phone or through earbuds. You just can't. So I am optimistic that live music will always rise above. Please. I'm hopeful.
Right. Well, so, like, what advice would you give to, like, someone that's just kind of starting out, saying, like, they're trying to find their own unique voice? Is that even possible nowadays to sort of stand out in this competitive musical landscape that's going on everywhere?
I mean, everyone's got to have a gimmick. And if you're, you got to learn to differentiate. If we're looking at it from a songwriter's perspective, there are times I will write a song for me. This is not for an audience. So it's long form. The structure doesn't make sense. It's longer than 2.5 minutes long. Like, this is for me just to get the expression out. And then, okay, I'm writing this song for the audience. It's got to sit within these basic parameters. It's 3.5 minutes is too long now. You got to get it down to 2 minutes and 50 seconds or whatever formulations that have been set forth for you. Okay, so we'll play within those parameters a little bit, play the game, but also just express, get out there and perform and see what is authentic for you and play the game, play the dress up. They want to see you in jeans and a t-shirt? Fine, I'll wear jeans and a t-shirt. You're never going to see me in jeans and a t-shirt outside of this photo shoot, but you want that? Okay, here you go. Here it is. If that's what's going to sell you a ticket, I'll do it. And I'll have fun with it because I like playing dress up. But I'm not going to take it personally, and it's not going to become my whole personality because one person thinks that that's what's going to make me break out above everybody else. What's going to make me break out above everybody else is just being myself because I'm the only me. I'm not a replica. And staying true in that, but also not alienating people for wanting to have an impact. That's the other thing. Just because somebody wants to see you in a jeans and t-shirt, it doesn't mean that you're wrong if you're wearing a pretty dress. It's like, no, they want to have an impact. They see something in you and they want to have an influence on what you're doing. Like, I can see that as a compliment rather than a, how dare you tell me what I'm going to wear. Its perspective is so important. And it's so easy to have, I don't know, I don't want to say have that stripped from you and to get jaded and everything, play the game, have fun, let it be a game, be playful, explore, experiment, and then step into your own and allow yourself to breathe and move and be free in your expression. If that means, if that affects how you dress or the genres that you play. I love doing the jam scene here in LA. I play a lot of jam nights because it pushes me outside of my comfort zone. I'm singing Enter Sandman with a metal band, and
That's awesome.
I slay out that song. It's so good because I'm very rooted in who I am as an artist. But yeah, I can sing some Metallica for you, no problem. And then I'll sing Natasha Bedingfield the next week. And that exploration of range still just enhances my abilities, I guess.
No, yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so it's like being authentic, but having fun with it, right? And kind of keeping yourself out there, and that's actually pretty cool that you go out and experiment with other jam nights, because I think that's pushes you again, just like working with these sort of higher profile session people and producers and things like that. Just getting out on the scene and jamming with people, you just have no idea who you're going to bump into, but it's also pushing you into areas that may not be comfortable, but if you overcome in the moment, all of a sudden it's like, wow, like I just crushed that, and I would never be singing Metallica had it not been for this night here, and here I am, and I just sort of, it just kind of puts you on a high.
Yeah. Well, the Sunset Jam a few years ago was like the night of the week. Every top musician in town would show up at the Sunset Jam at the Viper Room. And we would have this incredible jam night. And it was always rock and roll with a little, we'd have a couple different genres thrown in, but it was the Viper Room, it was rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And that was what expanded me up into this other playground of musicians. And that's how I wound up putting my band together. The Reverie was, okay, I'm really vibing with these musicians. And then through the pandemic, we kind of put our band together and we're like, this is actually really good. Do we want to make this a thing? The Viper Room really heavily influenced that rock element into my life. And instead of resisting what naturally flows into your life, like to flow with it and let it influence and kind of carry you, really leads you to a good place, I think. So I've been really grateful for that rock and roll influence that came from the Viper Room, and then, brought me my band, and now has brought me touring and all. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. And like your bio, it mentions specifically that you have a long career ahead. What are like some of the goals and milestones you want to achieve in these coming years as a performer?
Well, I'm very visual as an artist, so music videos are a big thing for me. Everyone keeps telling me that I have to push Spotify. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but what about YouTube? Like, go watch my music video. I love music videos for so many reasons, and so I want to do more of those. I've got some big ideas with my upcoming songs that I play live, but they're not released yet, like La Perla and Deeper. They're going to have a lot of push behind them. I've got an incredible team of people working with me that are helping to facilitate like some really big opportunities. So we're talking about touring in London and Germany in the next year.
Wow.
I got to shoot a few music videos in London last year, and so we're going to go and do that again this year. And bigger audiences, and when the audience is singing my songs back to me is absolutely wild. So I'd like to multiply that fan base. And I'd also really love to start writing for other artists. I think that is a long-term future thing for me, where I could really make a living, because I have so many songs and I don't have the time to sing all the songs that I write. So I would love to start writing for other musicians.
Yeah, let them go around the world and play, and right? And while you're doing your thing.
Yeah, I was going through my catalog and I came across some of the songs that me and Jeremy had written, and I was like, these are still really good. We need to put these out there. Like they hold up.
That's true. That's very true. You never know. Like I said, I think getting out there with different people, you just never know where someone's career is going to take like this trajectory, and your song goes along with it. It's very hard to predict, And I think that like outside of music, you mentioned, I believe, fitness, right? But do you have any other like passions or interests that sort of contribute to this overall creativity and outlook just on life in general?
Yeah, well, Pilates is a massive passion of mine. It was really a life raft as I was going through a tough transition a few years ago, and became a career of mine. And that's one of the great things about being in LA as an artist. Everybody here is a something/something/something. So to be a recording artist, live performer, you're a singer, songwriter / Pilates instructor / painter. It's like I have a very full range of life that I get to live every single day. And it's nice to not need a vacation from my life. I love Pilates. I love having an impact musically by people identifying their own story in my music. And then with Pilates, to be able to have an influence on people's health and wellness and sculpting their bodies and how they feel about themselves, how they carry themselves, affects how they breathe. And it's just this incredible domino effect. And to feel like I have an impact on people's lives that way is really fulfilling for me. And then painting's the hobby I don't get paid for, which is nice, where there's no pressure, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And it like I said, creative cross training for me. Mm-hmm. And I love to cook, and I love to make dream catchers and jewelry and play with crystals. I'm a girly girl and a rock and roll girl, so.
Creativity, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like the common theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone wanted to find you, I know you mentioned Spotify. I know you mentioned, I'm sure you have a website, there's social media. What are sort of the best ways for someone to connect with you for your latest news, tour dates, just learning more about you in general, how they could follow your story?
Sure. Well, if you go to my website, danihagan.com, it's got everything in one spot. You can click a link from there to go to Spotify or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. All the music videos are up there, and all of the articles and the interviews I've done and the photo shoots and all the upcoming tour dates and everything. It's all on one website. So that's a great place to start for that. And you can branch off to anywhere you want to follow me.
When's your next album coming out?
That is in the works right now. We're tying up my last EP that's titled Kissing You. And I think we're going to do another release of a song. I've got some big shows coming up in LA. I'm playing at my Madame Siam, and I'm playing at the Whiskey A Go Go. And I think the Whiskey Show will probably put a release out around that. And then I think in the new year, I'll put out the next EP.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, I will come to one of these shows for sure. Try to get Jeremy to come with me and come out and see you guys and do a little catch up in person, because this has been great. I really do appreciate you taking the time today to talk with me. And, I would love to do this again. Maybe, follow up with and see how things are going, once your albums are out and things like that, your album is out, and catch up again and just kind of continue where your journey is taking you and check in with you and see how it's going.
Yes, please. It's been so good to see you and catch up a little bit. And I would love to come back and have a follow-up chat.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dani. And we will talk with you soon.
Thanks, Joe.